Thank you so much for joining us for this meeting of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee of the Town of Collingwood. I'm the Vice Chair, Marion McLeod. This is Tuesday, September the 6th, and we offer our condolences to the Chair, Bob Madigan. And I will call this meeting to order with our land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others, who are families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and in community, nation to nation. I will look at this time from the floor for a motion to adopt the agenda, and the motion is that the content of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee agenda for September 6, 2022 be adopted as presented. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mover is Member Berman and seconded by Mayor Hull. All those in favor of passing the agenda? That is carried unanimously. Is there business arising from the previous meeting, members? Seeing none, I will ask for declarations of pecuniary interest. Any members have declarations of pecuniary interest regarding this meeting? Seeing none, I will caution you that if you do find yourself in that position, to declare it at the time. And so now I will look to item number 5.1, which is a staff report, and I believe I'm looking to Executive Director Peg for a discussion regarding Partners for Climate Protection Program update and corporate greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And I think Executive Director Peg will pass it off to our climate change specialist.
Thank you, Vice Chair McLeod. You're absolutely correct. So we have Nicole Yardy, who's our climate change specialist, virtually attending today, and she'll provide us with an overview of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair McLeod and members of the committee. This afternoon, I'll be presenting the highlights of Staff Report CCS 2022-11, Partners for Climate Protection Program Update and Corporate Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Target. Next slide, please. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the progress of the Partners for Climate Protection Program and to seek direction from Council and Committee on a minimum corporate greenhouse gas reduction target for the forecast year of 2030 to inform the Corporate Climate Change Action Plan. One note before I begin, I'll be using two acronyms throughout the presentation. So PCP refers to the Partners for Climate Protection Program, and GHG is a common acronym for greenhouse gas or greenhouse gases. Next slide, please. Starting with some background information as a reminder to the committee and the community watching, Collingwood Council unanimously declared a climate crisis in October of 2019 to demonstrate the town's commitment to protecting the community, economy, and ecosystems from the effects of climate change. Following this declaration, this council has taken various steps towards supporting climate action, including but not limited to joining the FCM and ICLEI Canada's PCP program in 2019, identifying taking action on climate change as a goal in the community-based strategic plan, and hiring a climate change specialist in October of 2021. Next slide, please. The PCP program is a 5-milestone framework to guide municipalities through the creation, implementation, and monitoring of local climate action plans, with the intent of implementing lasting and environmentally sustainable changes. The milestones are as follows. Firstly, to create a baseline emissions inventory and forecast, followed by setting emission reduction targets. Thirdly, developing a local action plan, then implementing this plan, and finally monitoring progress and reporting results. Next slide, please. Each milestone has two components, the community milestones and the corporate milestones, which are evaluated independently. The community milestones capture all emissions produced within the municipal boundaries, while the corporate inventory only accounts for emissions that are under direct municipal control. That being said, the corporate inventory is a subset of the community inventory that the town has the greatest amount of control over. Similarly, any businesses or household or personal emissions are also considered subsets of the broader community inventory. Next slide, please. Since October of 2021, Collingwood has successfully completed and received recognition for corporate and community milestone 1, and the results will be discussed on the following slides. Town staff have also begun work on corporate milestone 2, setting emission reduction targets, and outlining the path to develop a corporate climate change action plan, milestone 3, which will be discussed later in the presentation. Next slide, please. Beginning with corporate results, in 2019, town operations produced approximately 3,327 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is abbreviated to tons of CO2e, with buildings and fleet being the largest contributors at 34% and 38.1% respectively. While I speak to the points on this slide, can we please move to the next slide, which will show a visual representation of the corporate inventory? Thank you. Overall accuracy of the GHG emissions inventory is considered to be medium to high, as data was retrieved directly from utility companies, fuel summaries, and invoices. These findings are also consistent with other emissions inventories. This inventory represents the best available data as of July 2022, and if more information becomes available in the future or calculation methods change, there is a potential for the baseline inventory to adjust in response. As an example, and as some people may have already noticed, when this achievement was first published in April, we reported the baseline emissions as 3,323 tons of CO2e, and this slide is showing 3,327 tons of CO2e. This was not a numerical error or typo. The slight increase is due to more information being discovered between April and July. Small adjustments such as this may continue to occur, and we will keep council updated as required. That being said, we're not expecting any major changes from what is being presented today. Next slide, please. Moving along to community emissions. In 2019, the municipality as a whole produced approximately 207,218 tons of CO2e, with buildings and transportation contributing the most emissions. Next slide, please. Similarly to the corporate inventory, this breakdown is consistent with other municipal emissions inventories and is the best available data as of July 2022. The overall accuracy of this inventory is being considered medium. Where possible, data was obtained from utility companies and primary sources, but in situations where this was not possible, national databases and educated estimates were used. I will also note that this inventory has not considered natural carbon emission sources and sinks, such as trees and forests. New guidance on how to include trees and forests was recently released, so there is potential to include Collingwood's canopy cover in the future. Next slide, please. The final step to complete milestone 1 for both corporate and community inventories was to create a business as usual forecast to estimate what the town's emissions will look like if no improvements were made within the next 8 years. To estimate this, a 2.5% annual population growth rate was applied to both inventories to estimate 2030 emissions. And the results are as followed. In a business as usual scenario, Collingwood's corporate emissions in 2030 is estimated to increase to 4,365 tons of CO2e, and community emissions are estimated to increase to 271,888 tons of CO2e. Next slide, please. Moving on to next steps. To complete corporate milestone 2, council would need to set a corporate emission reduction target in the form of the town of Collingwood will reduce corporate greenhouse gas emissions by X% from 2019 levels by 2030. And a statement similar to this must be adopted by council resolution. Today and at the subsequent council meeting, town staff are seeking direction on a minimum agreeable emissions reduction target for corporate operations by 2030, which will be used to inform the actions outlined in the corporate climate change action plan. Next slide, please. Staff's recommendation to council is to adopt the following corporate GHG reduction target: that the town of Collingwood will reduce corporate greenhouse gas emissions by at least 20% below 2019 levels by 2030. The reduction target being presented is based on preliminary brainstorming discussions with 31 town staff members from various departments, as well as reviews of other municipal, provincial, and federal targets. This recommendation also takes into account the following context, which is specific to Collingwood. Firstly, that the town is in the process of expanding the water treatment plant, which will require additional electrical energy to operate and therefore increase corporate greenhouse gas emissions. That Collingwood has a growing population, which could require increases in municipal facilities, service levels, and maintenance between now and 2030. That the town currently has one staff resource to develop and implement corporate and community climate change action plans. And finally, that it's difficult to compare levels of ambition between municipalities because baseline years for GHG inventories range from the mid-90s to 2019. Next slide, please. The recommended council resolution will be used as a starting point in the creation of the corporate climate change action plan. By adding the words "at least" within the statement, staff will work towards and document every opportunity to increase the reduction target where feasible during the development of the corporate plan. The PCP program has confirmed that council will also have the opportunity to increase or decrease the GHG reduction target when reviewing the draft plan and required resources. One action already identified is the completion of LED retrofits to all relevant lighting being brought to council during 2023 budget discussions. This will account for a small percentage of GHG savings and mark the completion of an action identified in the town's 2019 to 2024 Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan. A proposed community GHG reduction target will be presented for council consideration in 2023, following the community education and consultation. Next slide, please. At this time, there are no additional impacts on town finances. However, it's important to recognize that setting these targets will have future financial implications. By mitigating greenhouse gases between now and 2030, there's still the possibility to avoid future financial implications associated with anticipated extreme weather events perpetuated by climate change. Any required resources to reduce corporate greenhouse gas emissions will be outlined in the Corporate Climate Change Action Plan and will be presented to council for consideration during future budget discussions. As always, applications for funding will be submitted wherever possible to offset the impacts on town finances. Next slide, please. By spending time and resources to move through the PCP program, the town of Collingwood is committing to taking a greater role in the leadership of climate initiatives. Thus far, the town has used quantitative data to produce corporate and community GHG inventories and business as usual forecasts. And as the town moves towards completing milestone 2 and 3, council will continue to be engaged and have the opportunity to provide feedback and direction on how to shape our community in the future. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank the committee for their time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions from this presentation or the staff report at the appropriate time. Thank you.
And we have CAO Skinner who has requested to speak. CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. I think that, as you hear this presentation, I just really felt compelled to talk about this as a bit of a momentous occasion for the town. We did have a climate change emergency declared, and we found the right person to help us through it. What we have today in front of us and in front of you and in front of the community is a baselining of those, what our tonnage truly is around greenhouse gases. It makes one pause. If you look at 207,000 tons going up to over 270,000 tons in the in the prediction period from town-wide. That's quite a lot. And you look at the town itself, between 3,000 and 4,000 tons. So it does make us truly understand that a lot of it is around our residents and businesses and what we're all doing collectively that's going to make a difference. A lot of this work, if not all of it, has been done in-house, so we were able to avoid some of the costs in getting a consultant we thought we'd need to do, but Nicole Yardy has been able to do those in-house. And there's some interesting pieces around how much contribution, for example, we're getting from transportation. And as a town that is looking at the future electrification of our buses and even the effects of tourism on people coming from afar to enjoy the town here, it's going to affect, I think, council's decisions moving forward. And council did support the Collingwood Climate Action Team with some funds to help individual houses start to change some of their practices. So I think this is our first concrete step to truly understand where we are and where we need to move. And I didn't want to let the momentous occasion go by without comment. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Momentous indeed. I will turn to members of the public at this time to see if there is any comment or queries, questions about this report. I do not have anyone in our gallery today, but we may indeed have some people online. Clerk Almus, is there anyone wishing to speak?
Thank you, Vice Chair McLeod. We do have David Ordling participating remotely that would like to address the Standing Committee on this report.
Thank you so much. Dr. Orling.
Thank you very much, Chair McLeod. And thanks to the CCS for the opportunity to comment on behalf of the Collingwood Climate Action Team on this report and on the importance of setting an ambitious greenhouse gas reduction target as part of the town's climate action plan. While our group's approach is predicated on being hopeful and taking positive action, I must admit that our initial response to the report was somewhat disappointing. While we need to be supportive and realistic in terms of the town's objectives, we also need to recognize the importance of the issue and that we are setting a goal that is still over 7 years in the future. We appreciate the town and the council supporting the work of our climate action specialists and the work that Nicole Yardy has done to this point. And we appreciate that resources have been invested to develop and implement a climate action plan. Our opinion is that the recommended minimum emissions reduction target is too low, and we note that there is no mention of aspiring to achieve net zero at some point in the future, which we would like to see. The rationale used for setting what the report admits is an unambitious target also do not stand up to scrutiny, nor do others' climate targets. And I'd like to make some comments about that, please. The population is indeed growing across the province, and the reality is that natural ecosystems that we depend on to buffer our climate are finite. Climate action plans of neighboring municipalities all use a reference that's after the phase out of coal, which occurred in 2014. And there is an assumption that increased electricity usage by the water treatment plant will increase emissions without any vision that the town can have a role to play in shifting us towards lower emissions electricity intensity. I'd also finally like to point out that although we do only have Nicole Yardy working on this file at the present time as our climate action specialist, there is a role to play for all staff and council members in applying a climate lens to their decisions and leveraging the work that she's done so that we can achieve greater things together. The corporate emissions for Collingwood are indeed small as compared to the community emissions. They're less than 2%, and the action needed by the community and society as a whole is significant, amounting to what can be considered as a transformation in the way that we supply and use energy, in the way we organize our communities, heat our homes, move from place to place, feed ourselves, and produce and use commodities and services. An important element of this transformation is that the town set an example that the community can learn from and follow. The Paris Agreement, to which Canada is a signatory, is a legally binding document whose goal is to limit average global warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius, preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. The planet has warmed 1.2 degrees Celsius already. Pakistan, as you will all have heard, is currently experiencing devastating flooding from unprecedented monsoons and the melting of glaciers in the Himalaya. Examples of catastrophic climate-related events are becoming commonplace, drastically affecting the lives of those affected with financial implications that we naively ignore. Canada's 2030 emissions reduction plan, released in March 2022, aims for GHG emissions of 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030, and to be net zero by 2050. Grey County's corporate target is 40% below 2018 levels by 2030 and net zero by 2045. Caledon aims to reduce emissions to 36% below 2016 levels by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. Barrie plans to reduce overall community emissions 45% below 2018 levels by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. And Orillia ambitiously aims to reduce corporate emissions as compared to 2018 levels by 50% by 2030 and be net zero by 2040, with a goal to reduce community emissions by 33% by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. Collingwood is preparing to host the third Collingwood World Summit Habitat in Towns this fall in support of advancement of the UN Sustainability Development Goals. We are projecting ourselves as a leader amongst peers, not only on a regional scale, but on a national and international one as well. We need to decide to what extent we want to be a leader amongst towns and to what extent we are truly committed to addressing not only a local, but a global issue which is afflicting others unjustly and disproportionately. The action we need is simple in principle. We need to greatly reduce and eventually stop burning fossil fuels and releasing other greenhouse gases such as methane into the atmosphere. We need to bring the system back into balance where the greenhouse gases that are naturally produced can be absorbed by the Earth's natural ecosystems. As the report alludes to, clean, low-carbon electricity is crucial, and the municipality must join other municipalities and organizations working to ensure that clean electricity can be generated locally and that higher levels of government and energy suppliers reduce and eventually eliminate the burning of fossil fuels to generate electricity. We need our governments to be truly aspirational, lead by example, set ambitious targets, and take the necessary steps to achieve them. Municipalities and citizens here and elsewhere will bear the brunt of the effects of a changing climate. Reducing our carbon footprint and energy consumption concurrently will also save money by reducing municipal operating costs with the co-benefits of a clean air and a healthier environment of which we are a part. Taking climate action will lead to a better life for the community of today and of tomorrow. Setting ambitious targets is the first step in making the changes that we need to make. So our group will accept that the recommendation being made is a minimum, and we hope that the final target set and the actions taken have the ambition that is needed. Thanks very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Orling. And I will turn, I think, to Ms. Yardy and ask whether there are any of the points that Dr. Orling has raised that you may wish to speak to.
Thank you, Vice Chair McLeod. I do appreciate Dave and CCAT's comments. I know a lot of time and review has gone into them. I don't disagree with what he has said. I think we do need to be aggressive in our targets. The reasoning for putting forward a minimum 20% reduction was to update council on what our thoughts are as of right now. And then bring back the final or the draft corporate climate change action plan to provide a more fulsome, thought out pathway to achieve whatever the final target is.
Thank you. And I will turn to Director Peg as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair McLeod. And thank you, Nicole, for those comments, and to CCAT for taking the time to review the report. Much appreciated. I just wanted to add to Ms. Yardy's comments that it would certainly be our intention to complete the analysis of the 20% and come back to council with possibilities for a greater target that were accompanied by financial implications. So the 20%, as mentioned, is a minimum. We would then come back with various scenarios and provide additional information to help council direct staff in that final target. So the reason for the 20%, again, is just to allow us to come up with financial implications, budget impacts, to provide you with all of the information prior to making a commitment to something such as 50%. But certainly Nicole and team are looking very closely at all options and recognize that this is a priority for Collingwood Council and the community, and we'll bring those numbers and financial impacts back at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll look to the clerk. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? There is no one else who wishes to speak. Excellent. And so I will read in the motion and the recommendation, and I will look for a mover and a seconder from the table. And it is item number 5.1, which is CCS 2022-11, Partners for a Climate Protection Program Update and Corporate Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Targets. And the motion is that staff report be received for information and that council direct staff to proceed with a minimum corporate greenhouse gas reduction target of a 20% reduction below 2019 baseline levels by the year 2030 to be incorporated into the town's corporate climate change action plan. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman and Mayor Hull. Conversation and questions from our committee. Questions? Councillor Carrier, followed by Mayor Hall.
Thank you. Just a question. On the slides, there's, I don't know what the number of the slide is. It doesn't say. It's the second last one, I believe, or third last one if you can count the thank you one. There's 4 bullet points. The second bullet point says by mitigating greenhouse gas emissions between now and 2030, there is still a possibility to avoid financial implications associated with anticipated extreme weather perpetuated by climate change. I'm going to assume that means international and national goals and targets being met, not the municipality bearing the weight of the world's responsibility with our corporate plan, just so that there's no misunderstanding out there in blogger warrior world.
Ms. Yardy?
And thank you, and through you, Chair McLeod. That is correct. It's not just Collingwood that needs to have action on climate change. It's every municipality and globally as well.
Second question had to do with the population projection, applying the 2.5%. Is there like a number that you're looking at to say, oh, Collingwood's population is, and please tell me you're not using the signs that are located at our entranceways because it's grossly inadequate. Director Slama had done a report a couple of weeks ago where she did the monitoring, and the report indicated that we had so many types of residences, and they put a per person or like a 2.4 person, 2.7, 1.9, based upon the type of household unit that it was. And that's probably a more accurate projection if you're looking at a per capita number. Is that the type of thing that you're applying the 2.5% to, like a more accurate number than we see in some other reports, or especially from the province and the feds when they apply, I think, a false population number to our municipality?
Ms. Yardy?
And through the chair to Councillor Carrier, we used population data from town documents. The way we put it into the program, into the PCP program, was just based on a percentage. It wasn't broken down by dwelling type, but there is opportunity if council wishes to get a more detailed breakdown by dwelling type. There is the opportunity to go through that analysis. Thank you.
And the reason for my comment on that, through the chair to you, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, my apologies. It's because the per capita, when we hear the per capita number, I think that's a grossly distorting number that's applied to Canada with a large geographic base and a small population. And we have people that have to commute long distances to work. I think when you take a look at the tonnage, it's a much more accurate number, where Canada falls well below 86th in the world as opposed to the top 10 by per capita base. So I'm just wanting to ensure that the information data set that we're using is an accurate one when I know it's going to be distorted at some point, and not by staff, and hopefully not by anybody sitting at the table. I think the goals are quite laudable. I think they're realistic. The numbers that I've heard thrown out with our speaker from the public, there was a lot of numbers. It would be nice if we're all starting at the same year, going, hey, we have this data set from 2015 and we're going to make this target, but we're not. I know that when I was on council before, when Mayor Geddes was the mayor, obviously, we had worked with the Environment Network. We had also became a member of ICLEI for a period of time before that got didn't happen anymore. But councils of those days were very proactive. When you take a look at the library is a very efficient building. That was something that was put forward. We introduced the busing and expanding the busing so that we could reduce the car infrastructure. So it's unfortunate that that data set's not there so that we can measure the successes in past from 15 and 20 years ago. But I commend you for getting a full data set for 2019 and setting what I think is a reasonable target with an ambitious goal to exceed that target. So congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Carrier. Mayor Hull.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make I think a comment, and it would be twofold, specific to the part of the chart or pie graph related to the community, and it referenced, I think, about 25% as it related to residential output in terms of emissions. The comment, I guess, the comment would be one as it relates to programming and a frustration that I've got. And it's not necessarily a frustration at the municipal level, but I think that there are communities, I believe, I stand to be corrected, Halton Hills is an example of a community that is looking at getting involved in being somewhat proactive in financing renovations, et cetera. And what I'm speaking to is the program that the federal government has been running, where in a generic sense, they're offering members of the public who own property $5,000 for renovation toward various things, whether it be replacement of windows, new furnace, conversion of one type of heating source to another, insulation, those types of things. And the issue that I have with this particular program is that it's like all of the programming that we offer. All of our programming, all of our incentives are for those who can afford it in the first place. The family that benefits from enrolling their child early in a program is the family that can pay for it up front, not the family that doesn't have the money. So they rolled out this program, and much to my surprise, I think we're a year and a half into it, and the dollar amount that was originally allocated for this program was not significant relative to the total federal budget, and yet it hasn't been exhausted. And one of the reasons is just quite simply that if you're looking at a $10,000 renovation in terms of windows to a modest home in the community, but you may not be a person who has the means to either have $10,000 in disposable income, $10,000 in credit, or an established line where you can put $10,000 against your property to be able to make the renovation to apply then for a $5,000 credit. And it's a real shame because we have properties all over this community. And when we talk about affordability, when we talk about those who are under the crunch in terms of meeting their financial obligations, it's amazing how we de-incentivize programming and the ability for people to take advantage of programming when they can't afford it in the first place. So the very first thing that I would love to see a new council look at in real earnest would be the ability to follow other communities where perhaps programming like that could be tied directly to their taxes in the form of a lien, et cetera, so that they would have the ability to borrow. And if there is failure of payment, well, the municipality's not out because they do have a means of pulling back at a later date. That would be just one example of a frustration that I've got. The other is that, and I hope that when we're reviewing our official plan and when we're looking at the long term, and I've got to be very careful when I say this, but there is, to my surprise, a property that I was driving past, and others I'm sure have seen it, where a new sign has gone up. It's a vacant property, a fairly prominent intersection, and it's showcasing the fact that there's going to be a future car wash. So here we don't have enough water. That's a separate issue. 2, water's a precious commodity. But 3, we don't have zoning practices in place that would prevent things that, in my opinion, and it is my opinion only, that are quite frankly not necessary. And yes, no pun intended, it's a small drop in the bucket, but it's these cumulative practices that we need to be looking at that will help to meet the targets. because it's twofold. One, it's another drive-through where you're lining up to go through the car wash, and two, it's using non-renewable resources in terms of power and the water supply. And then a question that I would like to ask, and it's not a question I'm looking for an answer today, but if perhaps it could come back with the report at council, and that is that there are communities, and off the top of my head, I can't think of them. I don't believe that they are in Ontario, where they have actually taken the step that if a developer comes forward with an application to develop for, say, a subdivision, uses such as natural gas are actually prohibited. So in other words, if they want to build 300 homes, they've got to be energy efficient and they have a starting point. And if they're not at the starting point, they don't get to go past go. So the question would be, is that something that we could look at doing, or are we legislatively tied, our hands tied, that would prevent us from looking at something like that? And that's a question to be parked for maybe when this comes back. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. And I will actually look to the CAO, Skinner, in the absence of our Director of Planning, Director Valentine, because I do believe that environmental sensitivities are connected to our SCAP, our Servicing Capacity Allocation Program. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, our servicing capacity allocation policy does have a number of criteria, and to move forward, and a development must receive 50% of those points if they haven't already been allocated capacity because of where they are in the approvals process. And outside of that, if people meet the minimums within the building code, for example, a lot of municipalities are looking at tools such as community improvement plans and the like to incent people to go farther than the minimum with respect to developments. So we did take note of the mayor's comments, and we'll certainly be looking at them further as Ms. Yardy and the team are proposing plans to council to move forward.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Mayor Hall.
Could I just clarify? I fully appreciate and understand. So under this gap, there are incentives, but if I came forward with a proposal that was heavily weighted on affordability, I would score fairly high. And if I met some of the other, minimum targets, I'd meet my 50% threshold and probably exceed it. But what I really would like to know is save and accept everything that's on the books because they've already come forward. If somebody came forward today for the first time and we wanted to put forward a motion in place that prohibited the use of energy sources like natural gas, full stop. Do we have that legislative power? That would be the question.
That you would like to be contemplated within this report. Thank you. Would we need an amendment for that? I think we might. And I'll entertain that amendment in just one moment. Councillor Berman, did you have questions or comments regarding this staff report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments. I think I remember at the very early in this term, a lot of us had an opportunity. I think I was with Mayor Hall to see a movie at the library. It was like top down, bottom up, and it was to do with this topic before CCAD even came together as an organization. And I think that over the course of less than a term, through the pandemic and everything else, that council started with the declaration that we passed, put money aside out of our asset sale funds, got involved with the Bee City and the Pollinate Collingwood, hired Miss Yardy, leading up to this report, which is a great starting point. So I think that it may seem like there's more that we could do, but this is a great starting point. I'd much prefer that this started at the 20% and staff and council have the ability to go from there than to start with what would, in a sense, be an empty campaign promise of picking a high number that no one's going to look back in 2030 and say, hey, you never reached that target. So I think this is a great starting point. And I think that more than just Nicole, we have, and so the next council, we have a CAO with who's an expert in conservation and background. We've got the deputy mayor who sits on the NVCA, and a lot of other staff and members of council that are involved in things that all tie into this. I think this is a great starting point because we had nothing at the start of this term. So thanks to staff and everybody that put this together. It's a great thing to build on.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments as well, and I'm going to, in the next few minutes, hand over the gavel to Mayor Hull. I believe would be the way that we would do this. I'm not sure what happens after the vice chair hands over. If the chair is absent, I think that the clerk will. She's nodding. I was right. Excellent. So I would like to see a few things included in this report as well as what we've discussed with the mayor, and I can speak from experience when it comes to the renovations that take advantage of some of these programs. I was in the position to take advantage of one of those. And in addition to the greenhouse gases that the introduction of insulation to my Century home provided, it also provided a reduction in the payments that my family is making for things like our energy consumption. So we're consuming less, but we're also paying less. But for those who are not in a position to have the initial outlay, they're getting hit twice because they can't have the greenhouse gas reductions, but they're also not having the reductions in the expenditures for their energy use. And so I'm very sensitive to that argument, and was very lucky to be in a position where I could take advantage of that, and with an on-demand water heater and also a new furnace thanks to your tax dollars. I appreciate that. And my bills have subsequently been much, much lower than they were when I purchased my home. So I'm very aware of that. And so I will look to Mayor Hull for his amendment to this motion with regard to including the possibilities. I'm going to look back to you for what your hopes were for that amendment, Mayor Hull.
Actually, I was going to maybe suggest that there be no amendment. If I could just have the question answered, and then based on what that answer is, then I would put forward an amendment one way or the other.
Okay.
At the council meeting, if that's okay.
We'll hold on to that until such time as.
That's okay.
Okay, and so when the report is brought forward to council, it will be amended with answers to Mayor Hull's questions. Is that something that can be done, Ms. Yardy? Or Director Pegg? Who would ever like to take that?
Thank you, Vice Chair McLeod. Absolutely, that's something staff will look into and have the answer as an amendment to the council report. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I would also request that in that report that there be some analysis of what the federal and provincial targets are currently for council's edification. And so I will ask actually for the mayor to take the gavel for a moment while I introduce an amendment.
Okay, and I'll turn it right back to you to table your amendment.
Thank you. And so the amendment that I would propose is a clause that would be included after the and that. So that a 20% reduction below 2019 baseline levels by 2030 be incorporated into the town's corporate climate change action plan. And the sentence that I would like to have included is, and that action plan include calculations examining the impacts of a net zero targets going forward. Just to have that extra information included. I will need a seconder, however.
We have a seconder for that. Councillor Berman. Question, Councillor Carrier.
When you say net zero, are you saying net zero on Collingwood corporate or Collingwood community?
Collingwood corporate, thank you for that correction, and I will add that as a friendly amendment to the amendment.
Are there any other questions specific to the amendment? And the amendment is net zero on the corporate. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Is that the only? Okay, I'll turn it back to you then.
Thank you. And so I will be I believe we have a mover and a seconder on this, which was Councillor Berman and Mayor Hall. And so I'll read in the amended motion, which is that staff report CCS 2022-11 Partners for Climate Protection Program Update and Corporate Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Targets be received for information, and that Council directs staff to proceed with a minimum corporate greenhouse gas reduction target of a 20% reduction from 2019 baseline levels by the year 2030 to be incorporated into the town's corporate climate change action plan, and to include calculations examining net zero corporate targets in that plan. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you so much for your hard work on these files. Item 5.2 is staff report CCS 2022-12, closure of municipal administration offices during the 2022 holiday season. And I believe we look again to Executive Director Peg.
Thank you, Vice Chair McLeod. Manager McQuaig from Human Resources is attending virtually, so she'll actually be providing the overview of the report for us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and through you to the rest of the committee. This request is being provided for the committee's consideration for the seasonal closure of municipal administration offices for 2022, as well as the recommendation to approve the ongoing annual closure of municipal administration offices during the holiday season. Employees are reviewing operational plans for the balance of the year 2022, as well as trying to make their own plans to integrate work and life obligations, focus on personal wellness, and schedule vacation periods, and an understanding of the days in which the statutory holidays will be observed and of the seasonal closure period will assist with their planning. As well, providing advance notice to the public of any closures is an important component of our commitment to excellence in customer service. The Employment Standards Act establishes statutory holidays, and the town observes additional holidays as outlined in HR Policy E04. And for the 2022 holiday season, this would mean that municipal offices would be closed starting the afternoon of Friday, December 23rd, reopening Wednesday, December 28th, closed again the afternoon of Friday, December 30th, and reopening on Tuesday, January 3rd. And in the past several years, Council has authorized the closing of the town offices during the seasonal period as recommended. So recognizing our commitment to providing exceptional customer service, staff have reviewed the historical demand for administrative services during the seasonal closure. No significant concerns were identified, and recognizing that in urgent situations, certainly administration staff would be available to respond. A seasonal closure also affords an opportunity for maintenance work to be performed in administrative offices without impact to operations. So as indicated, administration is proposing municipal offices be closed starting the afternoon of December 23rd and reopening January 3rd with limited or no disruption to the public anticipated. Each department has reviewed its proposed operating status for this period and the services that would be affected. And in summary, essential services, including fire, public works, and environmental services would remain operational. And the bylaw team would be on standby to address any urgent situations that may arise. Recreation and culture divisions will be operating on a holiday schedule, and our other divisions would have staff available to address any urgent situations. For this period, staff would use vacation entitlements or make arrangements with their supervisor to work or take the time as unpaid to cover the seasonal closure dates, and they would require basically 2.5 days of time to be covered. Communications would also ensure that the public is made aware in advance of any services or programs impacted through multiple channels, and include information on alternate ways to access services as well as contact numbers. The Collingwood Public Library would also be operating on a holiday schedule. So this report also requests the, got mixed up in my notes here, sorry. All right, so streamline processes and provide advance notice to employees, as well as ensure ample public notice of administration office closures. It is recommended that the seasonal closure be approved on an annual go-forward basis. Administration would continue to monitor the seasonal office closure and report back to council should a change in the recommended practice be identified. In closing, we greatly appreciate the contributions of our frontline employees who will continue to respond to community needs during the recommended closure period. and we will continue to identify opportunities to recognize and appreciate our workforce as an ongoing priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager McCuig. Any questions or comments from the public? Thank you, Clerk Almus. And so I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder that staff report CCS 2022-12, closure of municipal administration offices during the 2022 holiday season be received, and that council approve the seasonal closure of municipal administration offices for the period of December 28 through the morning of December 30, 2022, and further that council approve the ongoing annual closure of municipal administration offices during the holiday season. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Mayor Hull. Conversation regarding this item, members. Seeing none. Sorry. Already did. Seeing none, I'll call the vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 6.1 is actually item 6 is reports and minutes of other committees and boards. And the motion is that minutes of the various committees and boards provided below be received and recommendations contained therein be approved. And they include item 6.1, which is the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes from July 14th of 2022. And that contains a recommendation. And so we will pull that for the recommendation, but we will move to receive these minutes. And also item number 6.2, which is the minutes of the Trails and Active Transportation Committee of July the 14th. So at this point, we are going to be pulling item 6.1 for conversation and moving to receive these two sets of minutes. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Mayor Hull, seconded by Councillor Berman. All those in favor of receiving these minutes? And that is unanimous. So the BIA recommendation from item 6.1 is that council reimburse the Collingwood Downtown BIA for the funds spent to date incurred through the Downtown Archway project. I'll need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Mayor Hull. We do not have a seconder. And so we move on. Item number 7, consent agenda. That council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. And that is item 7.1, Town of the Blue Mountains, Blue Mountain Watershed Monitoring and Rehabilitation. May I have a mover to receive these items from the consent agenda? Councillor Berman, Mayor Hull. Any questions or comments regarding these items? Seeing none, I call the vote on receiving those, and that is unanimous. Departmental updates and discussion. 8.1, communications update from Manager Carter. In person, no less. Thank you and welcome to the podium.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here in person again. I'm used to watching from the online version. Actually, as that's coming up, I can take this opportunity to introduce Julie, who's next to me. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to meet her just yet. Oops. Has a breadth of experience managing her own communications business over the last several years, working for a select roster of clients, including the Town of Blue Mountains, where she managed and provided content oversight during the 2021 launch of their new website. And sorry. Sorry about that. She managed and provided content oversight during the 2021 launch of the Town of Blue Mountains' new website, ensuring factual accuracy, relevance, and consistency across divisions, wrote content for taxpayer mailings, online articles, town profile, strategy documents, policies, and video content, and provided editing and proofreading. Also an accomplished marketer and published author with over 15 years of experience across hospitality and tourism, snow sports, municipal and manufacturing sectors, and has strong skills and experience in copywriting, communications, CRM, social media marketing, content creation, video production, as well as video and event. Julie started with us just shy of 3 months ago, June 13th, and has been very busy since she started. She's helping with the creative content side of communications, creating social media posts, managing our social media channels, town page creation and ad layouts, as well as some work on the website and engaged Collingwood assistance. And you've probably seen her out and about taking photos and videos for the website, social media, and more. So I'm first going to take you through, it wasn't clear on the agenda necessarily, but what I'm going to do is go through where we've come so far on the communications division plan in Q2 and Q3. And then we'll talk about what's coming up in Q3 and Q4. And Julie's going to go over the details of the survey that we held. Slide, please. The communications division plan, I'm just going to go through this quickly as it wasn't too long ago. It was approved by council at the April 18th meeting of this year. The vision of the communications division plan is ensuring an informed and engaged community through proactive communications and a variety of public engagement opportunities with council. The transformational goals are divided by 2 categories, green for community and blue for internal. Each transformational goal had specific action items to be implemented. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but the first being ask the community what they want, be a trusted source with timely information, provide authentic and impactful two-way engagement with the community, internally provide visual materials, and improve internal processes. Next slide, please. So the first transformational goal, before we could get into any of the others, and simultaneously with the hiring of Julie's position, was asking the community what they want. A community survey was launched in June to gather information and feedback from residents so we can better understand the ways in which the community wants to receive information and to be engaged to participate in local government. I'll lead you through the results.
Krista. So just a quick overview of the survey that we ran throughout June. We received 290 submissions between online entries and paper copies. And results of that survey identified 3 topics that people are most interested in, being community events, development, land use planning, information, and public notices, so bylaw, road closures, and construction. Of the, of the current methods of communication that we use, the respondents most favored Facebook, the website, and our print pages in the connection. Some feedback regarding the town's communication on the positive side were that we had channel-specific Facebook and Instagram accounts, providing current, relevant, engaging content, community input, and transparency. Some other topics of interest included recreation, parks and trails, housing and affordability, traffic and roads, and healthcare. And next slide. So some of the suggestions for improvement in communication included door-to-door letters, a monthly email newsletter with topic-specific content. Now, there's a real kind of dichotomy between the print mailers and the hard copy and digital because of our population. And so we're evaluating the kind of factors such as environmental cost and those things in terms of or mailing versus digital. Town website, billboards and more signage around town, advertising for events or an easily accessible calendar of events, a kiosk at the front of town hall with information or an electronic billboard, more announcements in the online paper. So that feedback was coming from readers of Collingwood Today, which is an online only publication. Reinstating the Heritage newsletter. Website needs to be updated. Better use of Rogers local community station for news and events, and QR codes in restaurants for on the town's website. Some additional feedback included the town website having too many layers, being tricky to navigate, has outdated forms, and its searchability is ineffective. Now, pending budget approval, that website will be undergoing a redesign and improvement. So, hoping to meet some of those concerns. Next slide, please. And additional ways that the town could engage residents with council. These are suggestions from the survey. Continue. So radio Q&A, Facebook or Instagram live broadcasts where we could have different open sessions on various topics, emailing and continually letting the public know that they can email council more accessible in terms of whether that be email, meet and greets, ideas around that. Sharing information about individual counselors would help us to know who's making decisions and who we can speak to. A citizen census, which again, pending budget approval, will be undertaken in 2023, and that will be a more fulsome survey of our local residents through Ipsos. And then farmers market, continually having a presence there and potentially inviting council members to present at that booth as well as other departments where they can meet and greet with the public and provide information about the various initiatives that they're working on. Quarterly town hall was a suggestion to tell the public what's coming, what's ahead, and more education on how local government is broken down. So who's responsible for what? BIA versus the municipal government. There's confusion as to who does what, when, and how. That summarizes the feedback from the survey and our key takeaways. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm not done. Can you tell I'm new? So in summary, based on all of the feedback that we received through the survey and all of the information that we've parsed from it, our action items include meeting with each service area to review departmental communications needs and upcoming projects so that we can plan strategically and support them with external communications and internal. We're going to provide an inventory of all modes of communications going out across the organization, promoting each channel that we use, and updating the Connect with Us page to include all channels and options to subscribe to various newsletters, agendas, etc. We're going to look into print options and the cost for budget consideration, but again, also taking environmental impacts into consideration too. And we're brainstorming and working on an in-depth list of other topics of municipal interest and ideas around how we can promote those topics either through content creation, social media content, and we've got an ongoing list of ideas around that. So happy to discuss further if you're interested. That. Next slide.
So I'll continue now to talk about the things that we've worked on under the Communications Division plan in Q2 and Q3. So now moving to Q3. Be a trusted source with timely information. Issuing more news releases and social media posts on items that are significant or important to the community or maybe misunderstood, emphasizing accurate information, minimum 2 items per month. I do have a lengthy list here, but I won't go through all of them, but there is at least 5 in May, media releases, 10 in June, July 4, August, I think we're up to, we're up to 9 on decisions made by council, upcoming important information, the election, lots of big things happening. I thought summer was the quiet time, but it's not. Clearly not. It's been a busy time. And better inform all council members on key issues by expanding the distribution of the mayor's weekly speaking notes to all members with identification of key messages. So this actually started, I think, the week right after this communications plan was developed. Simply just adding you to the emails to make sure that you're informed and have all the same information. Next slide, please. Excuse me. The next item is under provide authentic and impactful two-way engagement with the community. In Q2, we were able to host the first of the conversations with council as part of the Earth Day event. It was in conjunction with the flag raising, where we invited local organizations and the public to participate and discuss all green initiatives, programs, and activities in the town. Likely Q3 will have to be skipped due to the election, so the next one's probably going to come out in Q4. So that's to be determined. Next slide, please. Excuse me, improve visual materials internal. Increasing video content. And Julie has been very busy producing videos, including promotion for the election, encouraging residents to run for positions on council, the Welcome to Collingwood video featuring the mayor to promote the upcoming Habitat in Towns conference that we are hosting in October, and a video for bylaw enforcement educating the public on parking near hydrants to ensure 3-meter distance is kept. Other videos in production or upcoming that I'm aware of, at least, are how to book the on-demand transit when that comes about, HR recruitment series profiling a day in the life, various departments and roles, and 60-second recap of council. Any more to add to that? That's about, okay.
There's a lot, but yeah.
The list grows daily. Very busy. And supporting to develop products and content, including layout and graphic design. Excuse me. So from nearly day one, Julie's been immersed in content creation, graphic design, and ad layout, including creative writing and ads for social media. Next slide, please. So coming up in the latter half of September, the rest of Q3 and Q4 is still to provide proactive coordination of opportunities for the media to engage with council and for operational items to senior staff. I have reached out to a couple of members of the media to see what that might look like. So that's still to be determined. Also updating the town's social media policy. That's going to be a big piece to chew. So we wanted to make sure we got through the election first so we can what our current policy says, looking at all of our platforms and approach to ensure that there's ongoing alignment town's desire for providing respectful forum and fact sharing, and looking at our channels as well, what we offer, where we're sending information. And the last is the implementation of the customer service module to track responsiveness. Excuse me, improve internal processes. So to introduce guidelines and appropriate levels of and times for communications or engagement for significant projects and the role of the communications division. So this will come up shortly as we're going through the budgeting process. I hope to go through with each. I'm getting flagged for the big items that are coming up for next year so we can do more planning in what's needed from communications. Implement a streamlined procedure for communications approvals and how they can be accomplished efficiently and quickly. Develop a communications collaboration committee MOU spanning all departments and the library. So with that, we plan to meet with each of the service areas. I've developed a template, which is still in the works, where we're going to inventory all of the current channels and methods of communication that departments are using. So we kind of have one big list and making sure that we're not duplicating and that we're using our resources wisely. Slide, please. Under improve internal processes, identification of large and significant projects that warrant a plan for community information and engagement, delivery of that plan, including consultation and collaboration with community groups and other levels of government. Finally, to provide training to managers, department heads, and selected staff to ensure implementation of this plan. I feel that that last one will come along with the meetings that we have with the service areas. It won't just be a training at the end. They're going to be part of that process as we go through it over the next few months. Our update.
Thank you very much, Manager Carter. Questions from the floor? It appears you have communicated effectively.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will continue our updates from departments with item 8.2, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Project Update, Partnerships for Municipal Innovation, Women in Local Leadership. And that will be Executive Director Peg bringing us this presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair McLeod and members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to provide you with an update on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, so FCM, and the Partnership for Municipal Innovation, Women in Local Leadership, so PMI-WIL, as I'll reference it as we go forward. Next slide, please. So before I jump into the project update, I do want to just take a moment to provide a brief overview of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, so FCM. I know this committee is well aware of FCM, but I thought for the benefit of anyone that may be listening in online or joining us today that I would do that. So FCM is a well-respected national voice of local governments. Their programs and advocacy help secure new tools that empower and enable municipalities to build stronger communities. Membership includes over 2,000 municipalities, representing more than 90% of all Canadians. Next slide, please. This year, FCM is celebrating 35 years of offering international development programming. Since 1987, FCM has offered these programs in Asia, Africa, Middle East, Latin America, Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. The programming has been and is centered around core focused areas, which include inclusive communities, which is linked to the Pinwheel program, among others like affordable housing, climate change, etc. Programs are based on a peer-to-peer approach to help ensure global partners learn how to foster lasting economic development and to encourage civic participation. Each of the program mandates vary, but they have the end goal of collaboratively finding solutions to national and global challenges that affect municipalities. Next slide, please. In September of 2021, staff provided council with a recommendation which was supported to respond to FCM's future calls for municipal community participants in international programs that aligned with our community-based strategic plan. Next slide, please. In review of the open calls for participants, we were pleased to apply to FCM's Partnership for Municipal Innovation, Women in Local Leadership, so the Pinwheel Project, in December of 2021. The objectives of Pinwheel demonstrated alignment with the Town of Collingwood community-based strategic plan, and we were pleased to be shortlisted through the application process and participated in a virtual interview with FCM, and that included staff participation as well as Councillor Jeffrey. Following the application and interview, we were informed that we were selected to work with the Ghana project team and partners. And in addition, the town was paired with a Canadian partner, which was Halton Region. Next slide, please. The Pinwheel Project is implemented in partnership with local government associations in 5 countries, so Benin, Cambodia, Ghana, Sri Lanka, and Zambia. It's a 6-year project running from 2021 to 2027. And as mentioned, we were partnered with Ghana. The project falls within FCM's portfolio of gender equality and women in local government initiatives. And the project is funded by Global Affairs Canada, and they'll be contributing $26 million, with the remainder of the cost coming from in-kind contributions from Canadian municipalities. There is no direct budget impact to the town as a result of our participation. The town's in-kind contributions include covering payroll and time costs for municipal administration participants, and that's part of the Global Affairs Canada and FCM contract. Next slide, please. The Pinwheel Project aims to achieve two core objectives. The first, increasing women's capacity to get involved and lead in local governance. And the second, increasing local government's capacity to deliver inclusive, gender-responsive services. Canadian municipalities, through their staff, elected officials, and relevant community organizations, will support these initiatives to increase the number of women running for local government and ways to strengthen the participation of elected women, female citizens, and local government officials, both women and men, to deliver and measure inclusive services. So Pimwell will support capacity development, outreach, awareness raising and engagement activities in all 5 countries at the regional and global level. Next slide, please. So to ensure Canadian participants were prepared for the participation in this program, FCM did provide mandatory training in intercultural effectiveness to our project team. The training was country specific and was delivered by an expert in cultural effectiveness who has many years of experience in supporting and training Canadians working overseas. At the completion of the training, the members of our project team knew more about the country of assignment, so Ghana, the concept of intercultural readiness and cultural empathy, and how to build effective intercultural relationships, and understood how to communicate effectively in an intercultural situation. Next slide, please. The next steps in the project will be to support the local government of Ghana in completing a self-assessment of their capacity. This will lead to the completion of a development action plan. Collingwood will be participating virtually in the meetings and events that contribute to the development of this plan. The plan development will be done in a series of 4 steps that is intended to take place in the months ahead. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. I'll keep going while the slides catch up. So the first step of the plan is anticipated to take place this month and next. It will be to finalize the tool that the local government will use for their self-assessment. This tool will need to reflect the legal framework of Ghana, so FCM is taking the lead on this portion. They will also prepare a guide on how to use this tool. The local government will complete their self-assessment with their local association and FCM. The second step, planned for October, Collingwood will receive a copy of the completed assessment and work with FCM to understand the content. The third step, planned for November and December, the project team will analyze the results of the self-assessment to identify similarities and trends, and then we'll be preparing for workshops with Ghana on those results. And then the fourth step will be a virtual workshop that's being planned for the end of this year, and more details of this will be shared by FCM once they're available. We're also aware that all project work will be completed virtually for the next several years, so no international travel is planned within this program for at least 3 years. Next slide, please. So staff continue to monitor the project status and receive updates from FCM. As the finalization of the project plan by FCM becomes available, we'll be providing updates to council at key project milestones. And the town's participation thus far has proven to be a collaborative experience. It has become evident already that FCM provides tremendous support to the project teams and will ensure an accountable and transparent process as we partner with Ghana and Halton Hills moving forward. And next slide is my last slide, but I asked that we put it up anyways because I think that's a great picture that was provided by FCM. That's an image of some of their international work in one of their locations. So thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Peg. Any questions from the committee members? Thank you so much for your time. Item 9 on our agenda is public delegations, which are a maximum of 5 minutes per. I don't know if there are any. There are none in the room. I will turn to the clerk and see whether there is anyone online who wishes to speak to this committee about any of the items which are on today's agenda.
No, there's not, Vice Chair McLeod.
Thank you. Item 10 is other business. Are there items of other business from the floor? Seeing none, I am now looking for a motion to adjourn. Mayor Hull. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Berman. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and attention.